I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a fan of this franchise that does not regard Crash 2 as one of the best of the series. The year is 1997. Crash 1 has exceeded expectations, selling over 1 million copies worldwide, becoming the 4th and 5th best-selling game in the US and Europe respectively, solidifying the franchise. The character Crash Bandicoot was no longer just an experiment made off the backs of other platformers. Instead, Crash was often seen on TV promoting his own game. Sometimes he even promote other games for the PS1. Crash was becoming a bit of a marketing behemoth for Sony, to greater or lesser extent. Naughty Dog, now having learned from the successes and failures of their first game, can finally bring Crash to his natural next step. And so, the show must go on. A direct sequel to Crash Bandicoot, picking right where the first one left off. However many times I have played Crash 1, you can just about double my time played on Crash 2. This game has always been one of my favorites of all time. The refined formula pretty much shines throughout this entire package. Improved gameplay, tighter controls, a larger scope and level design, a new rockin' soundtrack, and some of the best platforming this franchise has ever seen. When people say Crash 2 is their favorite Crash game, it's not really hard to see why. This video will be structured like my Crash 1 video. First, a general overview of Crash 2 as a game, along with its improvements from Crash 1. Before going deeper in its story beats, since this game actually has a story, no matter how simple. And finishing off in a few places where I think this game might have fallen a bit short. However, with how much Naughty Dog cleaned up this sequel, the section won't be like how it was on the Crash 1 video. Time to kick back on your... I'm Yorm, and you are watching a Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back retrospective.
Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. Press start to begin.
There's nothing quite like a good sequel. Crash 1 was always what I considered a solid platformer. However, with it being one of the first of its kind, that is a 3D action platformer, it came with a lot of baggage you'd expect. It had really experimental level design. More often than not, you're just going through levels in any way possible in what almost seems like random level scripting, along with some choppy character animations and a difficulty level that you can tell was not tested in the slightest. Which is why I'm so happy to report that Crash 2 excels in every single category than Crash 1, and then it goes beyond that. There are so many places to start when talking about improvements, but my favorite of them all are the ones that were done to Crash himself. The Cortex Strikes model. I'll tell you, man, this is my second favorite rendition of Crash Bandicoot of all time. I won't spoil my all-time favorite until we reach that game, but just know that Crash 2's look for Crash is a very close second for me. While I've always liked Crash 1's in-game model, I always thought it was a bit over-exaggerated. I think the extra wide back and giant face always made me think Crash looked more like an unfinished science project. And to its credit, that's probably what they were going for. But it just comes off kind of funny looking. Crash 2's model has always clicked with me more. Crash is a little skinnier, it's a bit more streamlined. His face also comes off more contained. He still has that crazy look in his eye, but I've always felt that this Crash has mellowed out a lot more. He's not constantly paranoid, looking over his shoulder. He can actually breathe for once and take in these environments. With that being said, I've always found this Crash Bandicoot as the one easiest for me to self-insert with. Whenever 7-year-old me was at home pretending he was Crash Bandicoot, this is who I was really picturing myself as. Of course, with this game giving us a brand new and improved Crash Bandicoot, there had to be some new controls to complement him with. Crash feels and moves better than ever. His new running animation is a lot less goofy looking. His jump has lost the floatiness of Crash 1 and retained most of the height. The new addition of moves like the body slam, slide, crouch, and crawl add just enough to make him more interesting to control. The game does a good job at making you use these new moves too. Some enemies cannot be beaten head on from a spin or jumping on top of them. However, a well-timed slide will dispatch them effortlessly. In another sense, There are crates or hidden areas where Crash's normal power isn't enough. Simple body slams are your last course of action in these types of situations. Unsurprisingly, the game never tells you any of this, unless you're someone who actually reads a manual. So it's nice to have these moments when just clicking the square button is not the answer to everything. Sometimes it's nice when a Crash Bandicoot game makes you think a little more. Another good thing about this new moveset is that these moves all do not have to be used separately. Rather, these moves can be somewhat chained together. Let's look at Crash's jump. While his base jump may be a tad lower in height when compared to the previous game, combining it with a crouch greatly improves that height. If we take things a step further, we can add a slide instead, and now Crash's jump distance is the best it's ever been, helping us cross wide gaps that in the first game would have surely meant game over. Surprisingly enough, that's not even where Crash's potential ends. From any crouch or slide, if you jump and spin at the same time, you will perform a glitched high jump. If you thought slide jumps got you places, wait till you're doing glitch high jumps all throughout levels. Flying over wider gaps and jumping to places you are not yet supposed to be can give you a sense of freedom that you never knew you wanted from a Crash game. But what if I told you you could go even further? Perform that new glitch high jump, and right at the peak of your jump, add in a body slam. Now you've reached Crash's ultimate form, the absolute apex of his vertical height in this game, and it actually has use, believe it or not. Since developers never intended Crash to reach this type of height, you essentially can sequence break with this combo. You can use it to skip parts of levels or use it to fix mistakes that normally would require a restart. I promise you, getting that red gem early using this method was the most satisfying thing you can do in this game. Well, that is until I can finally snag that gem early in the ruined level. I'm not giving up on this jump. I've seen a speedrunner do it. Doing all this kind of stuff makes you feel like you're some special player who's mastered Crash's controls. Normally in a game like this, you think it'd feel like cheating. But with Crash's moves feeling so natural to chain together, it feels just as normal as anything else. Using Crash's new moveset to its full potential makes going through these exciting new environments a blast to play in a way that's just not possible in Crash 1. Levels? Well, they're pretty good. One of the benefits of not having a linear map like in Crash 1 is the sheer amount of variety we're allowed to have. We still have the basic jungle levels that make up a pretty good amount of the runtime, and levels like Hangate still give familiar upstream vibes. But it's not long until you're platforming through snow caverns, getting accustomed to the new ice physics while jumping on seals. Snow Go just rocks. On a different end, you'll find yourself deep inside sewers, fighting rats, avoiding electric eel-filled waters, all while dodging the old sewer ventilation systems, with one of the best tracks in the game blasting in your ears. Ruined levels actually feel like a proper return to form. These levels give me the sense like we're finally seeing the outside portions of the Lost City and Sunset Vista. Instead of the climbing this time, we can comfortably explore the outskirts of the area. Vehicles are back, and I'm so happy I can say that comfortably with a smile. The jetboard makes a great addition to the gameplay. It controls nicely, there's a little boost mechanic to use, and some weird way it feels completely natural. Makes you think, yeah, Crash would have a jetboard. I love the way it's never the only thing you do in the levels is in. It's such a nice balance. Here you are platforming, avoiding snapping fish and man-eating plants, and leaping over gaps in the water. Then you reach the jetboard and blast your way over whirlpools and mines stationed everywhere. The levels it's used on often like to test you. Hangate and Plant Food offer a time trial for a gym. Master control of the jetboard is a requirement, especially if you plan to get the gold gem in the Plant Food, one of the tougher challenges in this game. Polar? Well, Polar is the best vehicle and cutest character in the franchise, and this topic is not up for debate. I like Pyrrha in Crash 3. but Polar is a Chad. His levels are such an improvement from the Hog levels in the first game, it's night and day. Moving Polar left to right feels incredible. His jumps are snappy and fluid. The levels feel spacious enough that you actually get to breathe in them. To make things even better, Polar comes with a charge move. You can use it to speed things up at the cost of control. A poor timed charge will pretty much leave you dead. On the other hand, it can be used to run over enemies. Add a jump to your charge and you'll be zipping through the level, flying over gaps. There's so much more depth than in the first game when you just moved left to right and occasionally jumped. You definitely get more satisfaction out of the Polar rides. In Totally Bare, you ride in the dark. Now reaction time is tested. Is this a normal jump coming up, or is this a gap so big that only a charge jump can clear it? Guess you'll have to find out. Jetpack levels? Well, I enjoy them. I know that's not what you commonly hear, but they're just so cool. I mean, hear me out for a second. Crash Bandicoot in a jetpack was the new thing. It was the marketing. It's literally the first shot we get of Crash in that title screen when he comes blasting on the screen. He looks awesome. It's the main thing featured on the back of the freaking box. I mean, rightfully so. It's Crash Bandicoot with a jetpack. Remember where Crash started? Washing up on some beach, fighting off crabs and skunks. And now somehow this knucklehead's in space? Took this guy over 2 decades to reach space and everyone loved him for it. Took our boy just under 2 years, I'm just saying. Yes, I know the reason most people despise the jetpack is solely the control. I get it. Inverted controls are a tricky thing. If your brain is not completely wired for them, they can feel really bad. Overall, the jetpack is pretty unconventional. I mean, I've played these levels for years, and even I forget that the turnaround button is circle for some odd reason. Play the jetpack level long enough, and you'll end up anxiously flailing about looking for the turnaround button just to get a box you miss. You'll accidentally go down from clicking up while annoyingly getting rocked back and forth from the zero gravity. However, if you just stick with the jetpack long enough, you'll fly through these levels as fluidly as you were probably meant to, avoiding hazards and collecting boxes. And maybe, just maybe, even stopping to enjoy the backdrop of the endless void. I've somehow managed to talk this long about a Crash Bandicoot game and haven't mentioned a single chase level. In short, chase levels are back, and I love them in this game. There's just something about the presentation of these levels that just gets me going. Chase levels were good in Crash 1. A bit simple, but the idea was so jaw-breaking at the time that it didn't matter. I often thought the ball was a bit too fast, if I'm being honest. It moved at the same speed as Crash, but the ball always started so close behind you that any deviations to the left or right allowed the ball to catch up on longer chases. The chases in Crash 2 feel like Naughty Dog really understand what distance is needed for them to be challenging, but fair. The result? Chase levels are some of the most fun you can have in this game. Crash Dash, Crash Crush, and Unbearable are top levels. These chase segments have so much character in them. The ball is always a little further back, the spacious level design feels better to platform in, and the different hazards they throw in for you to avoid are a lot more interesting. My favorite are the mines that don't kill you but rather slow you down, allowing the ball to catch up to you. I love these as a tension builder. It feels like the developers are seriously trying to get you with some of their placement. What really makes these levels good are how much of a production they feel like. When getting chased, Crash will often look back at the boulder with genuine fear on his face. I really like that animation. When you make it to a safe spot, Crash will go tumbling in the last second, Indiana Jones style. The boulder always looks really good, destroying everything in its path. The debris from electric fences and bridges being destroyed makes the chase even more terrifying. These levels actually have bonus rounds now too, a genuine pace breaker. It's not always running for your life. Crash Dash has a whole section when you can actually chill and run forward like a normal level for a little bit. And Unbearable just might be the best level in the entire game. Not only does it replace the boulder for a giant polar bear, but the level has not one, but 2 secrets in it for you to find. One of those secrets doesn't even come until right after the best part of the level, when you approach the last chase segment and see Polar waiting for you. Somehow they managed to sneak in a vehicle into a chase level, and it works beautifully. It feels so natural controlling Polar here. I'm pretty sure my jaw hit the floor the first time I played this part. It's that cool. I really hope that when Naughty Dog finished making this level, they were all standing around the room high-fiving each other, because this type of stuff is absolute peak. Those secrets I mentioned earlier are everywhere. Once you find one, it really opens up your senses for more. What I like the most about the secrets in this game is that they're never too ridiculous to find. At most, it just takes some lateral thinking or curiosity, like in Air Crash. On the first playthrough, you just hop on the jetport like you're meant to. But just with a second glance, you probably see a single platform in the water that has no discernible reason to be there. You'd see the suspiciously placed boxes in the water that just so happily can be used as a bridge to reach said platform. Rather, you actually think this is a secret waiting for you is up in the air. Either way, it's the draw of that platform. Pure gamer curiosity will have you wanting to try to reach an area that looks like you're not supposed to be in. And if you do actually make it there, you're immediately snatched up and taken to a secret warp room. This is the good stuff, I tell you. Rewarding the player for messing around and not just playing in these levels in the conventional way. Now you have to keep your eyes peeled for anything that looks suspicious. Though all secrets aren't made equal. I'm very certain that the one at the end of Bear Down was made so the player could definitely find out that there was a secret warp room in the first place. I'm pretty sure that was the first one my brother and I came across. The best part about the amount of secrets is that not all of them give the same rewards. Looking at Unbearable, the polar bear goes crashing through the bridge but leaves some fragments left behind before he falls. Those aren't normally there, but do you take the chance and risk a life to investigate this occurrence? Failing to do so doesn't mean you'll be missing out on the trip to the secret warp room. Instead, you'll miss a pretty beefy section of the base level. That means boxes, extra lives, Wampa fruit, all just skipped. If you're going for the 100%, you'll be replaying the level in hopes of earning a gem. If you never realize there's a secret here, you'll just replay the level until you go mad. Something similar to that happened to me on the Eel Deal when I was a kid. This level is home to a secret green gem. I basically played the level thinking I did an amazing job, combing through everything, breaking every last box, until I reached the end of the level realizing I was only rewarded one gem. I know this level has 2 gems, the game tells you, so obviously this led me to do what anyone else would do. That is, running through the level multiple, and I mean multiple times in a row, trying to find anything that looks suspicious or that I could interact with. You better believe this led to my absolute frustration, until it did occur to me that there is a room full of nothing but nitro boxes for pretty much no reason at all. So I go in there, mess around, and before you know it, I clip through the back wall into a secret area. Now, to remind you, I am a kid at the time. In my mind, I just broke the game. The only thing that let me know it was a secret was the challenge music that began playing. This is the type of secret I think works best. Nothing too crazy you have to look up or be super smart to figure out, but it does stick with you. A dumb kid playing Crash can find it on their own as long as you don't just completely give up. And I think that's how they all should be. Now, I wish I could say that was the same case for the blue gem. I just don't know how you were supposed to figure this one out on your own. This is level 1 of a video game, and they want you to play the game in a completely unconventional way. Like, not breaking boxes in a Crash Bandicoot game? Really? That's so gross. When I was a kid, I ran through this level so many times, and I'm fairly certain each time I broke every box. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure this blue gem in Turtle Woods is the first secret I have ever looked up online for a video game. There's people online who claim they figured this secret out on their own. I just can't believe that story. The little boy inside me that played Turtle Woods for hours won't allow me. Everyone loves the Nitro Staircase, probably because you feel like you have a 200 IQ when you realize none of the crates bounce. I actually like body slamming the plant enemy secret more. This guy is very annoying. I wanted nothing more than to kill him, and somehow I got rewarded for it. Man, this game is good. I really like Crash 2 if you couldn't tell. All this stuff is so much better and easy to come back to often. I guess that's exactly what a sequel should do. What's crazy is that even with all this stuff included, we haven't even talked about my favorite part of this game, the story.
Well done, Crash.
Crash 2 is actually interested in telling a story. I mean, it's a simple one, but it's a story. People like to pick at Crash 2's story, but I find it pretty charming. The presentation at least is a major improvement from the first game, and I appreciate it. We have cutscenes with full-on character animations and solid voice acting. How awesome is that? I know that sounds like something simple to get excited over, but you have to remember where we started. Crash 1's opening cutscene didn't even play upon starting the game. You just had to wait around on the title screen until it started playing. And when it did, it was rough. While Crash 2 starts with a bang, Cortex plummeting to the ground off the blimp you beat him in the first game, until he comes to and finds a power crystal. We get a time skip and our first shot of Engine, Cortex's new right-hand man. They come to the conclusion that the crystal that Cortex has is the Master Crystal, and it's basically worthless unless they can get their hands on the 25 slave crystals on Earth. This is a problem because in the last game, Crash basically ruined all the boss's lives and Cortex has no one else he can get to work for him. Okay, so this story is already going off the rails. Cortex has had a crystal for an entire year and this is all the information they have? Some genius, am I right? I do like the idea that Cortex is really smart, but too lazy to actually go out there and find the crystals himself. It's kind of funny when you realize he just gave up for an entire year because he was down on the number of henchmen at his disposal. Guess he could have sent Engine out there, but he probably wasn't up for it. This scene may be silly from a story side, but it does not stop me from loving it for everything else. The shot of Cortex's space station in space looks amazing. The inside looks amazing. The game sounds amazing. The in-game models look so natural and fluid. Brendan O'Brien as Engine makes his first couple of seconds on screen really memorable. And Clancy Brown gives you the best voice performance, not just as Cortex, but in the entire franchise here.
How do you expect to retrieve them when we don't have any Earthbound operatives left?
You fool! Do you think I'm unaware of the situation? If we don't have any friends left on the surface, then we need to find an enemy.
When I tell you Clancy Brown is my favorite Cortex, this scene is the reason why. Now, hold on, because I see you raising an eyebrow. Listen, I really like Lex Lane. It's more of just the direction of Cortex's character throughout the years I don't like. I'm really tired of the joke they keep painting him out to be. I feel like they have pushed Cortex too far into comedy first and an actual competent bad guy second. Unfortunately, it's Lex who has been voicing him throughout all that change. I just miss the days when Cortex was an actual threat. I mean, he's the main villain, right? When I was a kid, I was actually scared of Cortex. I'm pretty sure I had nightmares of him. That's not even saying he needs to be super menacing every time we see him for him to be a good evil character. In Crash 2, literally in back-to-back scenes, Cortex makes me laugh, then terrifies me.
Crystals. Of course.
I think that type of balance is what initially made him the character everyone loves. We then shoot over to Crash and Coco having a relaxing day. Coco sends Crash back to the house to get a new computer battery and we take control. I never like to look past the beginning of this intro level. I find it really refreshing. You can move around as Crash and get accustomed to his new moves. The music doesn't even play here. It's just a calm before the storm. This first pit can't even kill you and that's a big deal. Naughty Dog is learning better progression methods. I'm so proud. It at least shows there's going to be a better emphasis on level design this time around. Remember the bridge of boxes in Insanity Island? That was pretty rough for a first level. This type of stuff shows Naughty Dog was at least learning better methods to guide the player than before. It's a lot better than just throwing you to the wolves like how they did in the first game is what I'm trying to say. Not to say that the game is going to be some slow-paced mess. As soon as Cortex snatches you up and gives you pretty much no reason at all why you should be working for him, you have access to 5 levels. Now, I know in my Crash 1 video, I made a big deal about how much I loved linear maps of levels more than warp rooms. That doesn't mean I don't like the warp rooms now. Crash 1 was a game made with a linear level design in mind because Crash had somewhere to go and something to accomplish. That was getting back to the lab and saving Tana. In contrast, Crash 2 doesn't share this sentiment. Crash was initially enjoying his day, got snatched up by Cortex against his will, and now being told he needs to help. Cortex does this in the briefest way possible, mind you. He demands Crash's help, shoves a picture of a crystal in his face, and sends him off. He doesn't care where you get the crystal from, so why should we? He throws you in a room with 5 doors that leads to crystals, and he expects 5 crystals out of you. In that sense, the game is telling you it doesn't matter what order levels are done in. You're essentially just fulfilling a to-do list for Cortex, and refusing to complete that is not an option. I mean, you can come back from a level empty-handed, but he'll be pissed.
No, Crash! To save the world, I need crystals. Crystals! One more time. They look like crystals, Crash! Go back through one of those doors and bring me crystals!
I like when you come back with your first gem and Brio pops up. He's no longer working with Cortex. Brio wants gems to destroy Cortex. This scene is really cool because it's framed not like a 100% quest and more like an alternate mission. What if you could have actually progressed through the game without collecting crystals and just went for gems instead? Seems like a very missed opportunity or something that could have been really fleshed out. Brio tells you if you keep collecting crystals, he'll destroy you. I used to think this was an empty threat until I found out that the bosses that attack you in between warp rooms work for Brio. Ripperoo, the Komodo brothers, and Tiny are actually trying to keep you from collecting crystals and delivering them to Cortex, thus destroying the world, and that's pretty cool. When you do finally get crystals, Cortex just constantly gives you vague reasons on why these crystals are needed. The world is ending and crystals are the only way to contain it. It's all pretty much nonsense he spews out. The best part I often find of this story is when Coco is hacking her way in and communicating with you, letting you know her disdain for trusting Cortex. Her talks with Crash are always brief, but she's the only character that talks to you that makes sense. I also think it's pretty impressive she's hacking into a space station from a laptop that no doubt probably still has a fried battery. Coco's amazing.
Crash, is that you? I've been looking everywhere. I don't have much time to tell you this. You have to be careful. Trusting Cortex seems a little unwise. Crash, I can't keep the data path open much longer. Crash, you need to...
Eventually, Cortex tries to hit you with the old switcheroo. He accuses Brio as the one who's causing the world-ending threat. Now he wants you to deliver the 20 crystals you have to Engine. What's funny about this scene is no one else talks to Crash here. Coco doesn't come in and tell you not to deliver the crystals. Crash just doesn't do it. He seems like he's finally calling Cortex's BS and refusing to do something for him. That's a big moment for Crash. Instead of delivering the crystals to Engine, you fight him one-on-one against his mech suit. You hurl Wampa Fruit, dismantling his machine. It's probably one of the best fights in the game with how differently it plays out compared to anything else you've done. It's just you fighting a robot in space.
Like Dr. Cortex said, keep the 20 crystals you have collected for me. Cortex will be very displeased with your resistance. Prepare to suffer his wrath!
By the time you reach the 5th warp room, Cortex is out of gas. He's clearly mad at you, but I'm pretty sure even Crash isn't bothered by it at this point. I've always interpreted Crash as getting the last 5 crystals to keep away from Cortex, rather than to give to him. No one even talks to you in this last warp room. You just get the last 5 crystals at your own leisure. It's almost some last formality for the game until you reach that 25th crystal and everything comes front and center.
Yes! My plan is nearly complete, and I have you, Crash Bandicoot, to thank for it. Engine? What's happening? What's that? Is he giving our signal?
Crash! Cortex isn't going to use the crystals to contain the planet's energy. He's going to harness the force and use it to power the super Cortex vortex he has built on his space station. One blast of the ray will cover the entire world, turning everyone into Cortex's mindless slaves. Crash, don't let him have those crystals!
Engine, you fool! She's telling him everything! Ah, yes. We're back now. Pardon the, interruption. Crash, bring me...
So you strap on that jetpack one last time and race Cortex for the crystals. When you beat him, it all kind of ends pretty abruptly. Cortex is defeated, but his space station is still up there, a looming threat. And that's pretty much the game. Of course, it doesn't really end there. Brio's offer to destroy the space station is still on the table. You go back, collect any remaining gems you missed, and destroy Cortex's space station along with the last threat to the planet. Now, you could point at the story and laugh at it for being kinda silly. The bad guy from the first game is the bad guy in the second game. Who would have guessed? But I always find it admirable. The story isn't some terrible thing that keeps me from coming back and playing Crash 2. In fact, it's one of the reasons I overplay it so often. The performances are great. I love every time Cortex comes in and yaps all his useless lies at you. I love being in the warp rooms and using the center platform as an elevator, going in between rooms and getting attacked by the bosses. I love filling out all the crystals and gem slots on all the levels. Crash 2 is such a fun game to be in, and it really wouldn't be so good without the pace its goofy little story gives it. Crash 2 is probably one of the most solid platformers I've ever played. To be honest, it's probably the best Crash has ever felt, new games included. Complete control of Crash feels so surprisingly good every time I come back to this game. There's really nothing like being Crash in Crash 2. It's just the problem in playing Crash 2 is that the places you get to use them in get very tired very fast. Level variety in this game starts out pretty good. Warp Room 1 gives really cool environments. Turtle Woods is a fun jungle level. Snow Go gives us our first taste of snow in a Crash game and an introduction to ice physics. Hang Gate gives us a water location and cool vehicle segments. The Pits is just a jungle again in the afternoon, but the dual pathways I'd say keep them pretty distinguished from each other. It's still a fun level to go through. Crash Dash feels like we're back in the snow, but the lack of ice physics generally helped me count them as a different biome, and that's enough for me. The bottom line is we're in the first 5 levels and we've already had either repeat of level biomes or levels that feel fairly close. So what do you think that leaves the remaining 22 levels looking like? Well, in short, you end up playing pretty much identical levels for the entire runtime of the game. They might have different pathways and box layouts, but they do so little to differentiate themselves from each other that they often just kind of run together. Like yeah, the Ill Deal was pretty fun the first time through. I could even say it was one of the more memorable levels to play. Whenever I come back to this game, I often look forward to it. I can't really say the same about Sewer or Later and Hanging Out. I mean, they're fine. They don't really add much of anything to the formula. Hanging Out in particular has an emphasis on the monkey bars, so I could argue it's worse than the other two. You could say the same about the water levels. They all offer the same style, the same type of challenges and perspective. The jetboard makes them interesting, but it's always the same with it. The platform for about 20 seconds, jetboard for about 30 seconds, then rinse and repeat. Whereas the level that focuses more on the jetboard. It's a really fun vehicle to control. Wouldn't mind a whole level when you just use that. You would get to go off on more of those ramps and send you in the air doing cool tricks, maybe even add in some new enemy types in the water. Crash 1 reused level environments, but they only ever used the same level type twice, and they normally kept them pretty spaced apart on the map when you played them so you wouldn't grow so tired of them. There's just so much wasted potential when you redo the same level multiple times. Snow levels are the worst offender for this. In attempts to make the levels feel different from one another, they often just went with the idea of add more ice, which is an interesting idea at first, except the idea isn't great because it's ice physics, and ice physics are never great. Along with that, there's a major reliance on the 2D sections. Not that I don't like when Crash is in 2D, I just feel like it's taken a tad too far in the snow levels. The main parts of the level are in 2D, the bonus rounds are in 2D, along with the challenge areas. I prefer when the levels shift back and forth in perspectives briefly. It tends to make the levels feel a lot more dynamic. Snow Go did it right. You started with a fast-paced 3D section, got just a little bit of ice to mess around with, did a quick 2D section and bonus round, and fell back down to end the level in 3D. It was quick and clean. Nothing ever started to drag. Definitely one of the better levels in this game, pace and all. It's funny I say all that when Snow Go has an entire section that I actively avoid like the plague. Snow Go's secret entrance section is an entire ice room. Pretty much one of the worst things you can play through. This is why you grab the red gem early, I tell you. I like to keep myself miles away from this place. Not the absolute worst section in the game, though it is a close second. Cold Hard Crash's Death Route takes that crown. This section is a cavern full of enemies, gaps, and platform challenges. Let me tell you, all those facets working together, mixed in with you constantly dealing with the ice physics and its random momentum, becomes an exercise in tedium. And you haven't even heard the best part. This section needs to be done essentially 3 times to get everything. For some reason, there are actual boxes here and a gem placed right at the end, so you have a decision to make. Do I grab the gem floating there for me? Or do I turn around and take my boxes with me and go finish the level? Doesn't really matter what you decide, you'll be back. What's really interesting about this section is that they really expect you to backtrack through here. I mean, it's doable, but it's one of those things when I always find myself questioning, why would they even do this? It makes the last bit of ice in this game you play through something you really don't ever want to come back to. I will say the game did try its best to add in new environments. Each warp room at least added in one new aesthetic. Warp room 3 introduced one of the 2 ruin levels. Room 4 added the B levels, if that's what you want to call them. And the 5th room shoved a lot of space down our faces. The game was clearly trying to separate level variety throughout the floors, but couldn't keep up that pace as the game went on. Room 4 has 2 B levels in quick succession. I've never really thought much of these levels. I do like the digging mechanic, even if it just sums up to you waiting around underground for the bees to go away. It's an interesting idea, I'll give them that. These levels do get naturally tired when you realize it's just a boulder level but changed to play forwards. Even uses some of the same hazards like the electric fences. And while some of the enemies are a bit more interesting like the plant that shoots seed grenades at you, I still normally leave the levels feeling a bit indifferent. By room 5, the game doesn't have time to spread any of its new ideas around, so it kinda just lays them out on the table for you. 2 space station levels and 2 jetpack levels that close to each other seems a little ridiculous. The space station levels are pretty cool, but you play so much of them so quickly that they almost run together. I have a hard time trying to think of the differences between pissing away and spaced out, almost to the point where I just consider them part 1 and 2 of the same section. Having 2 jetpack levels this close to each other was a mistake. I mean, as we already discussed, I like the jetpack, but I'm an outlier. I think a lot of people dislike the jetpack so much because of how much you were forced to use it so quickly. Rocket and Pack Attack have 1 level in between them, meaning you end up learning how to use the thing at the tail end of your adventure. I should also mention it's used on the last boss. So essentially, in your last 20 to 30 minutes of game, you're using a totally new mechanic you've just been introduced to that we've already established has unorthodox controls for about half the time. Brilliant. They really should have held Pack Attack and put it in the secret warp room. Make it a reward. It'd make the player feel like it's something they earn instead of a requirement they have to do to see the first ending. It'd still be Pack Attack, but at least you remember getting the gem on it. Maybe even start to appreciate a little more having some time away from the jetpack. You know what I don't like in this game? Backtracking. Like Cold Hard Crash, Diggin' It has a death route with boxes, meaning no matter what you do, you will eventually be backtracking through the area. And that feels so wrong. Inching forward, trying not to run into a pit, waiting for the sound of a bee so you don't get stung. The death route is part of a dual pathway, so you get to make the decision to either backtrack through the death route or the right side of the level for the remaining boxes. I can't decide which idea feels better. The bees make either side feel pretty bad. It's challenging, I give you that, but the challenge is more in line with how tedious it feels. These levels were just not designed to be backtracked in. Instead of going back through the level naturally, it ends up feeling like you missed something off your own negligence, and now you have to rewrite that mistake. This wouldn't even be a conversation if the game didn't make you do it so much for gems. Pissing Away does this. The death route has boxes on it, but there's also boxes placed after the start of the route. You gotta run past it, do the bonus round, then come pretty much to the end of the level to get the last box. Now, if you didn't save that checkpoint box you most likely broke on your first way through, then any death on the way back or on the beginning section of the death route means you'll wind up back here. Only boxes that are broken before a checkpoint save, so when you do die, you find yourself in this loop of running forward in the level to get that last box, backtracking and praying you don't die to one of the many hazards on the way back to the death route. Then you have to sweat to reach the checkpoint on the death route itself. It's not impossible, but it's a case of the game expecting a lot from the player when they most likely didn't know what they were in for. Night Flight essentially wants you to backtrack in the dark, and I just don't know how that idea got off the ground. Unless you know about death abuse, this is whenever Crash collects something, either a crystal or a gem, he'll hold on to it after death. Then most likely Night Flight will play out with you taking the left path to do the death route, grabbing the gem and the 2 boxes, then backtracking to the right path because that side holds a lot of boxes and the bonus round. Fireflies last about 30 seconds apiece, if that, so you either dodge them, saving them for use on your way back, or use them because backtracking is really hard in the dark. Either way, there's a large part of the level that leaves you fumbling around in the dark looking for crates or dodging enemies in pits. Not fun. Now, I know the proper way to do this level is to hop on the death route, grab the gem, death abuse, do the level normally from the right side, then at the end of the trail, turn around and grab the last 2 boxes at the tail end of the death route. But how would a new player know that? How would a kid figure that one out? Took kid me forever to piece that one together. I'm pretty sure I used to save this level for last every time I played this game for this reason. It's not something I used to enjoy coming back to in the slightest. Bosses? Well, 2 of them are pretty good. As we already discussed, the engine fight is a real standout. Hurling Womper Fruit at a mech suit in space is as fun as it sounds. Definitely the best boss in the game. I love Tiny's fight too. The focus on platforming is a real blast. Making the fight around precise platforming while also having to outmaneuver your opponent was a great idea. Tiny's always a jump away from crushing you. The best part is waiting for the tiles to blink, then frantically looking for a platform to stand on. I wouldn't call the fight hard. That doesn't mean it's not fun. Tiny has always been my favorite boss design, and his soundtrack might be the best in the game. As for the other bosses, well, they exist. Ripperoo is kind of fun to fight the first time around, but that's as far as it ever goes with him. The fight consists of him dropping TNT and nitro crates on the floor while you look for somewhere safe to stand until he inevitably blows himself up. What you'll find is the problem with this fight on multiple playthroughs is that Ripperoo is not chasing you. Instead, he's running a set path for the explosives he drops. So essentially, after winning this fight for the first time, it'll never be interesting again. You'll find yourself just headed to the spot you know is going to be safe. Funny enough, all the spots are at the top of the platform, meaning you'll never have to go to the bottom half of the platform at all, and that's just sad. This is a real downgrade from Crash 1. Yeah, Ripperoo had set paths in that game, but with the platforming and waiting to time the TNT crates to blow up, the fight always played out differently. This is a real shame because everything looks really nice. Ripperoo is like a college professor reading a book when you come in. He's still at a waterfall, but everything's neat and organized. He's surrounded by books. Then he gets blown up and his crazy side starts to peek out a little bit. It's really well done. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking here, but this is the last time Ripperoo is a boss in a mainline game, so forgive me for being a tad bit annoyed. The Komodo brothers are pathetic. I like the Komodo brothers. I really do. Their design is great, the music's good. There's something about them that makes me wish we could see them more. More screen time would probably made them a really interesting pairing. But this fight sucks. You stand around a bit, moving out of Komodo Joe's way, then just spin them into each other. Komodo Mo just stands there and looks at you. I can tell his heart's not in it. Until the last phase when he finally throws his knife at you a couple times until they're dead. This fight has never really been what I call interesting. In my opinion, if these two were going to put up such a lazy fight, they'd be better off just bringing Koala Khan back so he could just flex on us. Cortex's fight? Well, if you could even call it a fight. Okay, this fight actually makes me upset. For some reason, they thought it would be interesting to strap on a jetpack and chase Cortex for the crystals. You chase behind him at a moderate speed, he doesn't even shoot at you, he just left some rocks for you to dodge. You spin him in the back a few times and you're done. If you do lose, he just laughs and you restart. This isn't a fight, this is a game of tag. There could have been so much more to this. Cortex could have shot back at you. There could have been some boost pads to make you gain speed on him. His health bar could have been more than 3 hits. My often thought is that this just had to have been one half of the original boss fight, and the rest got cut due to time restraints. I really do see a timeline where you do get the jetpack, chase Cortex to a space station, some type of transition or cutscene plays, then you fight Cortex one-on-one for the crystals. How awesome would that have been? Even just a normal fight would have been more warranted. I've seen a pretty good version online of a fight, and it's better than what we got. Remember the fight in Crash 1, the stakes it had? The spectacle of it all, fighting Cortex on top of his blimp circling his island, all the levels you went through destroyed from your meddling. How good it felt to beat Cortex and send him falling. Forget the Ripperoo fight, this is the biggest letdown maybe in all the Crash games, and that's a real shame. Whether I like it or not, this is the final boss to this game, and while it does actively disappoint me whenever I play it, it doesn't really make me that mad in the grand scheme of things. Naughty Dog was still fairly new as a team at this point, and they clearly had came a very long way in a very short time. Though there may be things I don't like in this game, it doesn't change how amazing it really is. I want to make it clear that this type of stuff that I'm mentioning does in fact suck, but it doesn't take away from anything I've said earlier. Crash 2 is so much fun to play, and anytime I've ever come back to it, I am always completely impressed. I've pretty much nailed this point to death, but Crash really does feel phenomenal to play as. I love running through these levels, glitch high jumping my way throughout all of them, riding through Polar's levels and flying in that jetpack. I love collecting every last Womba Fruit and running around with 99 lives feeling like a top gamer. I love going to the secret warp room and looking out at the islands in the distance and trying to jump off the roof to reach them. I love the allure of starting a new game just so I can collect crystals and gems again like it's my first time. Running through any of these warp rooms always gives me that tingly feeling. They're not that big, but they really do feel like a home away from home. The hours I spend in them after school has etched the warp room theme in my brain forever. Crash 2 does some things wrong, but it does way more right. Its improvements from the first game shine bright as ever, and its new features no doubt made a lasting impact on the franchise. I love this game, with all its problems included. I'd replay it any day of the week. And if you could even believe it, Crash 2 isn't even my favorite Crash game. While this always will be one of my favorite video games of all time, the title of my #1 Crash game goes to the one that wasn't afraid to experiment even further. The one that got a little weird and wacky. Simply, the one that got warped.
You fool! Do you think I'm unaware of the situation? If we don't have any friends left on the surface, then we need to find an enemy.